I'd now like to introduce you to Jane Rosengrave. Jane is a proud Yorta woman from near Shepparton in Victoria. Do you want to come and grab a seat here, Jane? Yeah. And Jane last year won the Tony Fitzgerald Memorial Award at the Australian Human Rights Awards for her advocacy and speaking up about the rights of people with disability and her own experience around abuse and neglect, but also about talking about what makes her feel safe now and how she was able to change those situations. So thank you very much for joining us, Jane.
Thank you for that, Dar.
So I'm just going to ask Jane a couple of questions, but Jane is very experienced at talking about the things that have happened with her. Just so people are aware, some of those things are quite graphic and
terrible.
Yeah, very terrible things. So if you do find that it's a bit overwhelming, it's okay if you need to step out of the room, that's all right. Yeah. But I hope that you would then maybe just come back at the end, because
I'm going to do a little action.
Yes.
Which I love.
So I'm wondering, Jane, if you could tell us a little bit first about your early life and where you were living when you were younger and some of the things that happened.
Okay, Samantha. I was taken away at the age of 6 months old, but under 6 months I was taken to a Lambie, Trana. I was always kept separate from the family because my mum discovered that I had epileptic fits and that from a little baby. And then later on in life, because we weren't looked after and we were kept dirty on the bed, yucky and all this. And my mum had to even bring money home somehow because the husband was not working at all. And that's how I became to be proudly Indigenous, which I'm happy about. And then later on down the track, the police were involved and we all had to be put into institutions. And we went to a home in Ballarat, which was called Nazareth House Boys Home Sebastopol, which was for babies from when they were born right up until when they were 5 or even a bit older. And then some of the things that happened there, which I can remember in the orphanage, was there was a swimming pool, and when the nuns used to call the people out of the swimming pool, the kids, there was always me that was the last one out of the swimming pool. The reason why is because I was under the age of 3, I was, and the nuns would say, right, get up the deep end and try and get out of the swimming pool and not climb these stairs. So I had to try and get out of the swimming pool and I couldn't. I was just so young, so the nuns used to duck me under the water. And that's when I used to think there was a new Jane that would do much better next time. And that happened to me for quite a lot, that did. And I can remember another one that was with the beds, like they were in rows, they were. And every time when someone wets the bed, can I stand up?
Yes, yeah, please do.
Every time when someone wets the bed, they were in rows, but the nuns had that much room to walk down, and they would fill the beds, and the ones who had wet the bed had to stay standing beside their beds, but the ones who hadn't wet the bed was allowed to get dressed and go and have breakfast. And the nuns would say, right, everybody, the ones who wet the bed, back in the bed, lie there until I get to you. And they'll put the sheets over our head, they would, with these real big large safety pins. And we had to smell our own urine. We had to, and we used to get a lot of rashes as well in the orphanage and that. And then after that, I was there from when I was 6 months until 5 years old. And then after that, they were waiting for a vacancy for when they were called in those days, the retarded, spastic institutions and all that. So once the vacancy came, that's when Pleasant Creek Training Centre came up. To me, it wasn't so pleasant, but I'll get into that. And I went into the institution of Pleasant Creek Training Centre, and I saw all these kids in the playground, and I thought they were my brothers and sisters because I didn't even know I had a family. I didn't. And I thought the nurses was my mum and dad. And I was sexually abused there, but at the age of 6, I'm not 6, I'm 8, that's when they got information about my mum that passed away, and I was in the institution. And they said to me, do you know your mum's dead? And I was in the dining room, I was, and I didn't even know I had a family out there. I thought the institution was my family. And I was even sexually abused at the age of 6 years old at Portsea at Marlborough House by one of the staff members. And I had to rub his head that night when I was at Portsea because of being a government house. The Browns were looking after it and all that. The Browns they got paid by the government, they did, and they had a son named Gordon Brown, and there was Mr. and Mrs. Brown. And there was, in the Marlborough House, there was about 25 bedrooms, but they had 2 beds in each, they did. And it was for all children who were from these institutions that never had families to go to. And I was sexually abused by one of the staff members at the age of 6 years old. Because when I was getting tired, and after I rubbed his head for an hour, I was falling off to sleep. And he said to me, Jane, and I said to him, I want to go to bed. He said, I'll take you up to the bed. So he took me up to the bedroom. He watched me get undressed. He did. He took me down to the toilet. I had to go to the toilet, and then he popped his out. I had to touch it, and because he knew that I was close to the Browns. The Browns were spoiling me because I was so little and young and never had no family. And that's when he threatened me not to tell anybody about what happened between him and I at Portsea. So I didn't. And then when I went back to Pleasant Creek, which was not so pleasant to me, two weeks or probably 3 weeks after that, and I was still in toddlers as a little girl, I thought it was ordinary, and I went up to the boys' ward after what happened to me at Portsea, and I thought that was ordinary. And I got into serious trouble by the night nurse that night. I had to go on my knees against this wall near the office with my hands on my head for a whole hour. And that was my punishment for going up to the boys' ward. And then other things happened, like Charlie the Strap. We used to get Charlie the Strap, velvet soap rubbed in our mouth if we swore at the staff, go on our hands and knees against the fireplace in the dining room, go without our meal if we swore at the staff or didn't do as we were told, or if we didn't say our prayers, all that. And there used to be a little cupboard that had Charlie the Strap kept. That was written Charlie the Strap on there. And I can remember that I was sexually abused at the age of 13 years old by a staff member down at the front office on a weekend when all the other wards were going swimming, and us senior girls weren't, and they wanted to go swimming, and I said, all right, I'll go down the front office and I'll ask the big boss if he can ring our office in senior girls, make us go swimming. He goes, I want you to do me a big favour. Go in the other room, pull your pants down and get ready, and I'll lock the front door. So he did that. I was waiting, and I had to pull him until it came. Then he said to me, I'll ring the front office and I'll make sure that you go swimming while all the other wards are going swimming. And that went on for a couple of years. And then I turned 16 years old, like there was things happened there. But 16, this bus driver got attached to me. And he wanted to take someone out from the institution. And he got permission from the front office, and there was other girls that liked him too, but he picked me out of all the girls. And he said, and then he said, Jane, would you like to come out with us? So I go, yeah, to be a bit more freedom. So I did. And then I used to go and put the bus away with him at the bus company. And that's when he said, go up the back of the bus, pull your pants right off and wait for me. And he closed the big gates. He did. And that's when he raped me at the age of 16. And I said to him, why am I bleeding? He goes, you've got your period. Oh, okay. And he said, don't you ever tell anybody, because if you do, you won't come out with us again. Because you feel a bit more freedom, don't you? I do, I said. And then after that, down the track, he said, would you like to work at the shop? I go, yeah. He goes, you'll get paid 20 cents Friday and Saturday. And it happened again. While the family was at home, there was only him and I at the shop. That went on for 3 years at the bus company and the shop. And then down the track later on, like you're allowed to stay there until you're 21, but I stayed in store until I was 26. That's when I met my partner, and I started to find my family on my mum's side, and then I moved down to Melbourne. And then that's when I started to join Western Port Speaking Out, which was down at Frankston. And that's when I started to stand up, but not properly because I was still having the epileptic fits at the time. And it was still like a little mini institution to me because they were like running it their way, not running it our way. And then after I had the surgery, because I had the brain surgery in 2004, yeah, I will. I used to have epileptic fits of a night time, and I used to wet the bed, bite my tongue and that, and I had a scar on my brain that was, causing my fits. And it was because, which I don't like the stuff, marijuana, when my mum used to smoke it when I was in her stomach. A lot, and drink and all that. And I had the brain surgery at the Royal Melbourne Hospital in 2004, and I went in, it took about 5.5 hours for the brain surgery, and then I went into intensive care, and then the doctors was hearing someone laugh for a whole hour. And I didn't know this because I was in there for 3 hours, but I was laughing my head off, and one doctor told me I wouldn't believe him, another doctor told me, and then another doctor told me, and I started to believe it then, I did, because it was all the relief coming out of me over those years, what I put up with. And then after that, after I had the surgery, that's when I decided to go and join Reinforce, which was a strong, powerful self-advocacy group in Ross House that has been running since 1980. And I was going with my partner at the time. Who he wasn't from Stawell, but he had his brother from Stawell, and that's how I met him. And I was still so used to those institutional days that he was domineering me, bossing me around, hitting me, telling me what to do, writing notes down, how to say sorry, which it was hard for me. But after I had the surgery, that's when things changed. And he did not like it at all. He didn't. And I gave him 3 chances. I did. The first chance, when we had our fight after brain surgery, would have been about probably 18 months or whatever after the brain surgery. I let that one go. And then the second fight would have been about probably another 18 or 3 years down the track. I decided to tell people what was going on in Cranbourne, on what he was doing to me, so they can go back and warn him, so if it happens again. But the third time, when it did happen again, he headlocked me, slapped me across the face, he kept me hostage in the community house. This was all in the holidays, and I found out he was talking to someone on his shoulder. I found out. And that day, that time after, because the police were involved and it was in the holidays, and he would not let the ladies in for the kids to play with the toys and that. And that was the last chance, because I wasn't crying. I was so used to it. And he was saying, I want you to say sorry to me in a particular way, and I want you to mean it. And it took all night, and I couldn't, because I was so used to it from over those years when I was having fits and after my brain surgery and all that. And after that, I left him the next day. I said to him, I'll see you tonight, darling. But I didn't. I went to Melbourne, had my piece of paper, 12 pages, back to front, all this, what happened. And I showed Jan, who's a good friend of mine, Jan Coles. And then after that, that's when Jan said to me, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to go to the police, but I'll go to open place as well, which is open places for people who've been brought up in institutions. And that started in 2009, and that's where they have counselling for people who need the help if they've left their partners but they've got no families to go to, and that. And they helped me, and they took me back to Cranbourne to the police station, and it was the same policeman that was involved that day, a couple of days ago, that was worried about me. And they said to me, I am really glad that you came, Jane, because I was so worried about you. And what he told us was not good. It was not the right thing. Like, I could tell by your body language that what he was saying to us when there was a burglary that was in the community house, that was not true. It was because your body language, and that's why we winked at you, that what you, with your body language, said it was a domestic violence, and that's how we knew. So after I left him, I started to be closer to Melbourne, and I was under Sacred Heart Mission for a while, and then they put me up to the list up on for people who need to get a house and that. And because I was Aboriginal, I never had family to go to and that. And they said to me, would you like to live right in the city? You can have a look at the place if you want to. And I go, yeah, I will. So I had a look in the place, and it's the bedroom, the kitchen, the laundry we share. And I said to them, yeah, I love it. I've always wanted to live in Melbourne, I said. And that's when they said, okay, well, the name of the organisation's Wintering Home, which is for people over 50. And you're very close to Ross House, to the organisations that you go to there. Open Place, to the Aboriginal Health Service and all that. And then I said, after a year or whatever, I felt very, very different. And I felt like if I was, I'll do it now. And can you take a photo of it? I'll show you. I felt like if I was free as a bird, because you only live once on this planet, and you are dead for a long time, and you might as well make the most of it on being free. Because if you're free, you can please yourself what you want to do. And you don't have to depend on anyone else. You don't? So that's what I love. So thank you very much for that, everybody. So that was really good, me telling my story, and I really hope that you really learn a lot from it. And there's, if you want to go into my story, there's ABC Late Line, Jane's story, which I was on ABC one couple of times. And there's the Royal Commission, telling your story on abuse. There's Open Place, you can type that in. That's for people who've been brought up in institutions. And there's Reinforce for people with an intellectual disability as well. There's SARU, Self-Advocacy Resource Unit. That's in Ross House. And I'm under Wintering Home, which is for people over 50, which I've got a caseworker there, and they come with me to the doctors, but the doctor directly talked to me. But any words I can't understand, I say, can you explain that to me, please, and that. So, which is good. And my health has actually improved a lot since I've left Robert. I don't have to worry about anything. I can just depend on myself, and I'll be living for a long time yet. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jane. I think, Jane has been through a lot of things in her life, and the things that came out strongly when she spoke yesterday as well was that when she found more people around her that she knew she could trust and talk to, and that could help her change those situations, and that was what was really important. So that's a really nice point to stop and have our morning break on, and then after the break we have a panel from some different areas, including family health services, disability services, the police, that can tell us a little bit more about what's actually happening now in terms of what different areas can do to respond to and prevent abuse and neglect. So morning tea is just in the room at the back, and we'll see you back in about 15 minutes.